This tutorial is part of our full stack React Django DRF channels project, DJ Chat. You can watch this tutorial and many more from our YouTube course playlist, or the whole course, including access to additional resources from our Udemy course. The Udemy course link, which provides the best price for the course, is in the video description. So now we've sorted out the primary app bar, let's go ahead and now create the primary drawer. This, very much like the app bar we just created, there's quite a bit of code here, but we have covered the basics when developing the app bar. So this should be a little bit quicker to build. Now, this is the primary app bar here on the left-hand side. You can see it open and closes, but it doesn't fully close. You can see that it then leaves this option of seeing the icons related to, in this case, the different servers. Now, at the moment, this is just a placeholder, if you like, because we're on the home page. This would just show some of the popular channels, or servers, that users might want to access. When a user logs in, potentially we're going to change that so that it shows the user's favorite or most used servers. So some other behaviors for us to consider and some design decisions for us to take is what happens when we scale down. So you can see it scales down potentially here on the right-hand side is a little bit too small. And we might want to kind of trigger an event just before it gets to that scale. But you can see when it gets to around about 600, it looks like everything folds down. Now, something you could do, for example, is that when it scales down to maybe about here, you can see on the right-hand side, it's getting a bit small. It might be that you trigger the primary drawer here to actually be closed like that. And that's going to give you a little bit more room. So maybe that is a function or maybe that's something that you add into your design so that it better folds or shows the popular channels when it gets to this screen size. Okay. Notice also that the behavior here, that's something else you might want to consider. It's closed at the moment. Notice that when we get to the smaller screen size and come back open again, it is then opened up again on the left here. So that's something else you might want to configure in your particular design. Right, so let's get going. So what we're going to do in this component is also show you how to start to configure some of the different transition speeds and behaviors related to transition. So we'll go ahead and have a look at that as well. And that would just extend this section a little bit more, but it does give you a little bit more information, which can be useful because there are some considerations to think about when you start to configure the transition speeds. Right, so in Pages then, we're in Pages, and where are we? I'm lost. Okay, we've got the home. We've got a template here. So we want to now add a new template. This is going to be the primary drawer. So we're just going to call this primary drawer. So let's just set this up. So we're going to need some sort of return. Just put placement in for now. And then the default export primary drawer. Doesn't matter how many times I do it. Export default, there we go, primary drawer. Right, so now we have that in place. Let's go over to the home here, and we can actually now add that to the home right here. So this is going to be the primary drawer. There we go. Now, unlike the primary app here, the primary drawer is going to have something inside of it. So we're going to make this very much like a template, which we can then add some additional inners to it, and we'll show you how to do that shortly. So we'll just leave it open and closed like that, and then obviously what we need to do is import that in. So this is going to be the primary drawer, and there we go. Right then, let's get going. So inside of the return here, let's go for a new drawer. So this is going to be a drawer. Inside of our drawer, just to bring that in, inside of our drawer here, we're going to have a box. So let's just build up the framework. And then inside of this box, we're going to create another nested box. There we go. So let's just remember what we learned previously. So let's set the open equals. Now I'm going to set this to, this is going to be maybe a little bit confusing. You can change the different variable names and so on, but I'm going to create a new state here, and that's going to include open and set open. So const open, I'm going to create the set open so we can change the state, and then let's use state. So we'll set this to true to begin with. So when the user accesses the component, so the application, this drawer is obviously going to be viewable. So let's just quick fix that to include that in. And there we go. Actually, let's just go ahead and add the box. There we go. Right, so the first thing we wanted to do here then is we want to make sure that when the user navigates to a smaller screen size, that in actual fact, it then hides the drawer. So I think that's what we want to do first. So let's just do this in a slightly different way. Now I'm going to bring in the theme. We're going to need the theme again. So let's go ahead and import the use theme from, what's that from? From MUI / material, but it's styles, isn't it? Styles. There we go. And then we'll just bring this into our component theme. Theme equals use theme. Okay, so that's our theme. So what we're going to do here then is we're going to create a new constant here. I'm just going to call this below 900. For example, of course, maybe below 900, but below 600. Remember, that's the medium width. So we'll use the use media query again. And this time what we'll do is do this in a slightly different way, just to show that this can be done in or defined in different ways. So here I'm going to set the max width to 599. That's just 1 pixel less than the small breakpoint. Okay, so anything below 600, right? So max width 599. So now what we have is a constant which is going to hold true or false depending on the size of the screen. If the screen size or the browser size is more than 599, below 600 is equals, oh actually, this equals, that's a good point, I can't remember, false. Then if it's below 600, it's going to equal true. Right, so we're going to utilize that then to open and close the drawer. So we need to now just set that so it utilizes that. So we want to obviously track the below 600 constant. So we're going to need a use effect for that, like we previously set up in the previous component. So let's do that, set open and then below 600. Okay, and then obviously we want to track this constant here, so we need to define it. There we go. So let's update our component with the use effect. So now what we can do is we can populate our state, in actual fact, with the constant below 600. There we go. Let's just add something into our drawer so we can see what we're looking at. In actual fact, what we do, if we go back to the primary app bar, let's just go ahead and copy and paste the loop that we created here. So I'm just going to copy this from line 67 onto the primary drawer, just so we've got something to see, and we can then also have a look at the scroll action. So we're going to need to bring that in. Typography, there we go. All right, so let's take a look at what we've got so far. If we have a look at now changing the screen dimension to more than 600, you can see that we now have our drawer appearing. Now, there are different types of drawers here, and it's important for us to use the correct drawer. I think what we're looking at here is a temporary drawer. So it means that we can open and close it while we're using the application. And what we're probably looking for is to utilize the variant permanent. So let's take a look at how we can change that. Right, so let's go back into the drawer here and change the variant to permanent. So you can see straight away that by changing it to permanent, we now don't have this grey section, which is utilized to obviously initiate removing the temporary drawer. So we've now set the drawer to permanent. Now the problem we've got here is it's permanent, so it's not going to go anywhere. So you can see that when we move below the 600 now, whereas before it was being removed, now of course it's not, because the drawer is permanent. So below the 600 pixels, we are going to need to change the drawer from permanent to a temporary, so it actually gets removed. So for that, we can create our if-else instead of just defining permanent. So variant, let's go ahead now and specify below. So below 600. So depending if it's true or false. So this is essentially just building an if-else. If you're not familiar with JavaScript here, this is a ternary operator. So if, for example, true or false, then we're going to then perform or set the drawer differently. So for example, let's define temporary, and then we'll go ahead else. So true or false, remember, then we go ahead and set permanent. Okay, so that needs to be in the doubles or singles. There we go. So if you're not quite grasped the understanding of the below, where it's going to be true or false, then by all means just add a console.log, and then you can go ahead and, don't know why I did that, you can log that in the console to get a better idea whether we're true or false. So let's go back into the browser here. We've got the console open here. You can see it's set to true at the moment. So true, true, true. And then soon as we move across to over 600, you can see down here in the console it's set to false. So that gives you a better indication now whether as to what's being held here and what's being utilized here. So for example, if the screen size is below 600, so if it is below 600, you can see that it is specified true. If it's above 600, it's false. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense now. So set open, false. So this is being set to the opposite of below 600. So if the screen size is going below 600, this is true. So we're using the exclamation mark here to kind of convert that into, or use the opposite, sorry, which is going to be false. So when it gets below 600, that will be true, but we're making it the opposite by utilizing the exclamation mark, and that's why the use effect is then setting open to false, and thus then closing the drawer. This now hopefully makes it a little bit clearer here how we're using this ternary if you've not used this before. So we're specifying below 600, true or false. So this is what's going to happen if it's true. So if it's below 600, we've got a temporary drawer. And if it's above 600, we create a permanent drawer. And there we go. Right. So we have our permanent and then we have our temporary, and it's closed. So we can see that one of the issues we have here is the fact that it is underneath the app bar. So what we're going to need to do here is create some padding or some margin so that the actual app bar is moved a little bit lower down. Now, what we want to be careful of here is that, remember, we're using the full height of this screen. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to initiate the actual browser scrolling. So we don't want to actually scroll down this page. The only time we ever want to scroll is within the inner components. So we don't ever want to scroll the main page. So what will happen if we were to create a margin here? In actual fact, this will then lower this block further down the page, and it would then break the page fold, and then it would show us the actual page scrolling ability. So we want to try and avoid that. So let's see if we can simulate that. So we want to add now in our drawer, we want to add some different styling here so that it positions it correctly. So we're going to need to specify paper props in order to define these props, change the styling for this drawer. And then we can use SX, and then let's go ahead and add some margin at the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate that. So calc, actually, we're not going to calculate. Let's, I was going to take us on a different direction, but I'm changing mine now. So let's just go ahead and set the margin at the top to the at bar height. Now remember, the at bar height is going to come from the theme. We've already specified the at bar height in the theme, the primary at bar. That's going to be 50. Now we have already added the theme here, so we can access the theme. Now something we need to be careful of here is how we actually specify this. So this needs to be colon. We only need the single braces there. So from here we can now specify the theme. Inside of the theme we have the primary at bar, and inside of there we have the height. As soon as we've done that, take a look. It looks a bit strange at the moment, and you can see that in actual fact now this navigation bar now moves below the fold, which isn't ideal. So if I can kind of show you that there, see if I can, don't seem to be able to grab the main page, but you can see that just disappears, which is not useful at all. So we need to deal with this. So let's specify the height. Right, so let's specify the height. So height, and now we'll go ahead and do a small calculation. So we're going to need the backticks for that. So calc, and then we'll do a calculation. So what we'll do, we'll start with 100 view height. So that's going to be the height of the browser. And then what we want to do is we then want to minus the theme app bar height. Right, so let's give that a go. So here we're going to need to theme app bar height. So we start with the actual height of the browser, and then we remove any remove the height of the actual app bar. So that's then going to give us the maximum height of our drawer. So what we've got here then is the height from this border from the app bar at the top here to the bottom of our page. So the problem we've got here is that we're not actually specifying pixels at the moment. We just have this 50. And this is why you're seeing this. And what looks like it's happening here is actually 50%. It's not using pixels. It looks like it's using percentage. So this is setting a margin of 50% rather than 50 pixels. So let's see if we can change that. And then at the end here, we just specify px. Now notice that that probably also needs to be within. There we go. So let's give that a go. And you can now see from the top, you can now see the number 1, and it gives you a good indication because the scroll bar starts right next to the border at the top. Right, so when we scroll down, you can now see that in actual fact, is going much lower than the fold. Although on your screen on there, it kind of stops around a bit there on 87. On mine, it does actually go further down, and yours it will do as well. So in actual fact, the height is also incorrect at the moment. It's going below the fold. So this scroll bar is going below the fold. So that is because of the same reason. What we're trying to do here in this height is we're trying to actually subtract the height in pixels. So we need to also specify pixels there as well. And then when we do that, although you can't see on yours, actually I'll just move it very quickly. So you can now see that the scroll bar goes down right to the bottom and no further at all. Good. Apologies if I'm embellishing a little bit here, but hopefully you start to see what we're doing there. That's really an important principle when we work with all the different components here inside of this section below the app bar. We want to always specify the height to be the height of the browser minus the fixed app bar. So now we want to set the width. So the width is going to come from the global theme. We haven't set this up yet, but theme, primary, draw, and then dot width. So we're going to need to set that up right now. So head back into your theme. So this is because we want to create a global parameter or global setting that we're going to use on other components. Like I keep saying, we could just use the main CSS file and define it there, but we're not going to. We're going to add it into the theme. Right, so for that, we're going to need to create 2 new interfaces. So let's do the theme first. So here we're going to specify the, the primary draw. Okay, and we want the width. There we go. And then I can just copy and paste that down here. Primary draw width. I can then go ahead and specify the primary draw, of course, and then set the width, which is going to be set to, what should we go for? 240. Okay, so don't forget the comma there. And now we have a primary draw width of 240. So when we go back and have a look, there we go. Right, so when we move inwards, it should be removed. There we go. Now, while we're inside a theme here, what we also need to do is set the closed width. So we just call this closed and we set that to 70. And of course, that doesn't exist yet, so we just need to now add it up here. So we can set the width, and we want to also set closed. So that's going to be a number. And then we can do the same thing down here. Primary draw closed. There we go. So as and when we're ready, we're going to specify the fact that when this draw is closed and it's permanent, it's going to close to the width of 70 pixels. Now we need to build some sort of button that we can use to open and close the draw. Let's remember the draw is controlled by this state here. So we need to define true or false, and then that will then correlate to the draw being open or closed. So first of all then, let's just take a slightly different approach, and let's create a new function for both opening and closing the draw. So we'll create a handle draw open, and we can use that to trigger the draw to open. So this would just set open to true. So whenever we call this function here, then it's going to set the draw to open, and then we do the same thing again, but for close. And then we'll set that to false. So let's just imagine that we're going to be building some sort of button that we can use to open and close, and we want to attach it to those functions here so we can open and close the draw. Now, this is just an example because we haven't built a component yet. So let's make this into an individual component. So we're going to create a new component for the actual toggle icon. So let's go into components. Let's create a new folder. And this folder is going to correlate with maybe the template that we're using. So in this case, we're going to call this, in this component, new folder, we're going to call this folder the primary draw to correlate with one of our templates. And then inside of here, we can then build a component. So let's call this the draw toggle. Right, so let's get going with this. We're going to call this draw toggle, and then it's going to return something. What it's going to return is a button of some sort. So let's create a new box here. Inside of this box, we're going to have an icon button. Okay, I have an icon button. And that's pretty much it for the structure there. So we just need to maybe specify some styling for this. We're going to give this a height of 50. So I appreciate you can't really see the benefit of this or directly, but this will display the button in the way that we want it to be presented. So we want to justify. There's a little bit of playing around here when initially building this. I want to justify content. I'm not too sure why that isn't being... got a comma there. Okay. Very strange. Line items, center, and then finally justify. So we're going to justify the content in the center. Okay. So let's bring in the box. Update all missing imports. So we've got box and icon button. So depending on whether the actual drawer is open or closed, the icon button will change from a left to right chevron. You can see that the button is changing, pointing to the left and pointing to the right to indicate which way the drawer is opening or closing. So let's just set out the export here, default, and we want to set the draw toggle. Okay, so what we're going to start off with, let's just get this working in place. So let's go for a chevron left for now. Let's make sure we bring that in to our project. So that's going to be slightly different. I'm not entirely sure where that is. Oh, it's already brought in. Okay, but it's in the wrong place. So I think it should be material / chevron left. And then you won't need, either way, it doesn't matter, does it? Let's just work this way. That's fine. And now we can go ahead in the primary drawer. Let's go ahead and actually import it to where it needs to be. So first of all, we need to actually import this in. So import is called draw toggle. Now here it's actually giving me the path to it, but in yours it might not be. So notice that you've got the // to indicate the fact that first of all we need to identify where we are inside of this template. That's where we're typing this code inside of this component here. So we need to come out of this folder in templates. We need to come out of this folder, so // and then we're inside the pages folder. So we need to come out of that folder too. So hence the other // here. So now we're inside the root, and then we can go to components, then we go to primary draw, and then the draw toggle. So that's how we're going to import into our project. So now we just need to put that in place. That's going to go inside of, where are we, primary draw. It's going to go inside of the drawer here. So let's put it on top for now. I'll just reduce this to around about 50. We don't need so many numbers. So let's add this right here. So that's just going to be the draw toggle. There we go. So if we take a look, you can see this is the current position of our toggle button. I'm pressing it. Obviously, it's not connected to anything yet, so it's not performing any action. So how this is designed is that once there is text inside of this box, we'll notice if we look at the preview here that this text, popular text up top left here underneath the DJ Chat logo, that is actually in the same line as the button. And this button is just literally floating above. So this button here is going to be positioned on absolute. So we're going to position it absolute in this container at the top right hand corner. So if we were to keep adding text here where the word popular is in the top left, it would go underneath probably this button. So we're going to position this button absolute. So let's just set that up now here in this box here. So you don't have to do this. Of course, there are different ways to achieve the same outcome. So SX need equals. So position absolute, and then we need to specify the position. So top, from the top, 0, and then from the right, we're going to position it 0, and then padding, set that to 0. Sometimes there's padding we want to remove, and then let's set the width. Now the width is going to be dependent upon whether the toolbar is open or not. So I'm going to use open, so true or false. So if it is open, we're going to use auto, and then else we're going to use 100%. Right, so if we go back now, you can see that the chevron button has moved across here to the right hand side. That's pretty much where we want it to be placed. And we now need to make it so that it obviously closes and opens up the drawer. So that was the framework set out now for the primary drawer. We included a component, so we imported a component, showed you how to work with that, thinking about, breaking down your page into smaller components where possible, or where potentially those elements of that component will be utilized in other components. Now we have all the structure in place, let's go to the next tutorial. We'll add all the functionality so we can actually start to close, open up the drawer.